LeetCode problem number 207, course schedule. So this problem gives us numCourses of courses labeled from 0 to numCourses minus 1. So basically it is 0 indexed. And we are given an array of prerequisites, where the prerequisites is AB, which indicates that you must take course B first if you want to take course A. So here it gives us an example of the pair 0, 1, which means that to take course 0, we have to first take course 1. And then the goal of this problem is to return true if we can finish all courses, otherwise we return false. So for example here, it gives us 1, 0, which means there are no conflicts, so it returns true. But for this case, since there is a loop, right, so to take course 1, you have to take course 0, but to take course 0, you need to take course 1 as well, which conflicts each other. And basically, now that you have seen it, so the main problem is to find whether or not the prerequisites has a loop in it, and if it does, which means we cannot complete all the courses because one course depends on another, and basically it forms a cycle, which means that it is impossible in a way. So the way I did this is to use a depth first search. So the first thing I did, so let's say this is one of the examples given in the test cases. So the first thing I would do is to, over here, I have a 2D vector which I will call the graph, and this vector will basically be storing the courses as the index, and as for the value, it will be the dependencies, right? For this case, to take course 1, I will need to finish course 4, so it will be like this. And then let's say to take course 2, I will also need to take course 4. This 2, yeah. So this is 1, and then to take course 3, I will need to take course 1, and here I will also need to take course 2, right? So this is what this graph is for. I'll be putting it in this way. So we know for each course what are the dependencies needed, right? So what I'll do is, let's say if I have to go take course 1, okay, and then there's another one, course 4 does not need any other courses. So I start with course 4 first, and since I depth search into course 4 and I see that there is no required courses to take, then I end my depth search and I can clear this, which means that 1 is possible to complete. Now I look at 2, which also means 4 does not require any prerequisites, so I can erase this, and now 2 is possible to complete. And if you look at 3, since we have looked at 1 before, and 1 we know already it can complete, so we can basically remove this. And for this number, which is the same thing, we saw that we can complete it, so we can just remove this. Another example would, let's say there is another pair like so. Let's say to take course 4, to take course 2, I'll need to take course 1. Wait, sorry. Let's say 3, course 2, I will need to take course 3. So in this case, my course 2 here will need an extra course dependency. So if we do the same thing again, since 4 we can complete, this we can complete. But for this case, since we default search into 1, we know we can complete 1. And now that we have reached 2, and since the only way we can tell that we have revisited course 2 is to have another vector which keeps track of the courses in the graph, basically, that we have visited. Right? So in this case, you can see here, this vector stores an integer which stores 3 numbers, 0 which means it's not visited, 1 which means we are visiting in our current loop, and 2 which means we have visited it. Visited meaning something like, let's say if I had visited 4, that means I'll mark 1 as visited, because 1 basically leads to 4, and we know we can solve 4, which means we can solve 1 as well. Right? So this will basically improve the efficiency. Alright, now that I've talked through the process, so if we start from here, I'll assign the visitor status to all beginning with 0, which means that all of the courses have not visited yet. And then my graph, I'll resize it to the current number of courses. Right. Afterwards, here I input the prerequisites into my graph using mPlaceBack. So this will make my graph look like this. Let me just remove this. My graph looks like this. So let's say for index 0, or more like for index 1, since 0 will never be used. For index 1, it will be pushing back the 4, and then here index 2, I'll be pushing back 4 as well. For index 3, I'll be pushing back 1. So you can tell that this vector kind of works like a map, but I'm using vector because it's more memory efficient. And for the last pair, I'll be pushing 2. Right, so 0 will be empty. Afterwards, I run the default search for each subject, for each courses. I run the default search. So let's take a look at what the default search function do. Here, I check whether or not I've visited this course. So in this case, the default search I'm running, right now, the course is 0. Right, since the course is 0, the visited status is also 0. Right, so I mark this as visited. So I mark this as visited. Let's have another visited, which basically works the same way. 1, 2, 3. Here I think I should need a 4 as well. Yep, for this one. So 4. Okay, as I said, I'll mark this as 1, the visited. So I'm currently visiting index 0. Then I reference the vector, but since it's empty, so this will basically skip. And then I mark the course 0 as visited instead of visiting. And I return true. Since this if statement only checks if I'm returning false, it will just continue to the next course, which is 1. Now if you look at 1, we have not visited it. These two just do not trigger. Now I mark this as 1. I reference the vector. So the vector for this case would be like this. There's a single 4 inside. And here, I run a for loop to iterate through all the courses in the vector. For this case, there will be only 4. And I run my depth search again. So I run my depth search, course is 4, and for 4, I'll mark it as visiting. Again, I reference the vector, which in this case the vector is empty, as stated over here. You won't run this for loop. You mark this course as visited now. Right, so this will be visited, and return true. Once that is done, this for loop from our course 1 will end as well, and mark this course as visited as well. Then return true again. Next, you increment. Now we are going to course 2. For course 2, this does not get triggered. We mark it as visiting. We reference the vector, which in this case is 4. And then we run a for loop. Depth search, course is 4. Now for this case, since the visited course is 2, as you can see over here, we can just return true. We don't need to run all of this again. Right. So when this returns true, this for loop will end because it has finished iterating all the courses. Mark course 2 as visited, and we move on, returning true, and we iterate again. Now we are looking at course 3. For course 3, we mark it as visiting, reference the vector 1 and 2. We run a for loop, running both depth search on both course 1 and 2. Since course 1 and 2 are visited, so they will return true. Finish iterating through the vector, mark this as visited, and then return true. Now since everything returned true, so we can just return true in our canFinish function. But let's say there is a interruption. Let's say there is a cycle instead. Right. So to make this short, let me just use the 0110 0110. So my initializing will be like this. So instead assigned to zeros. Graph will resize it. Then we input the prerequisites. This will be 1, this will be 0. I run through depth search for course 0 first. Okay, these two functions won't trigger. These two if statements won't trigger. You mark this as visited. Mark this as visiting. Reference the vector, which is 0. No, which is 1, sorry. This 1. Run a for loop that iterates through the courses in the vector. Run a depth search. Course is now 1. My course is now 1. Doesn't trigger. Mark this as visiting. Just now I forgot to mark it visiting. But yes, just now 0. We were visiting 0 just now. We reference the vector. Vector now is referencing course 0. We run a for loop. We depth search again. Is 0. But now, since the visited status of this current course 0 is 1, which means that we have visited course 0 in our previous cycle. Over here, this should be 1, this should be 0. Yeah, so we have visited 0 already, as you can see over here, referencing the course 1. So which means that we have found a cycle, which means we cannot finish all the courses. When that happens, we return false. this will return false. Since this returns false, this if statement will trigger, return false once again, return false again, and over here it will return false. Right, this can finish function will eventually return false, meaning that we cannot finish all the courses. Right, we have found a cycle in the graph. Okay, so this problem is a bit tricky, but once you have known the trick to it, which is to use you can use a map, or in this case I'm using a vector. You can use a map for this, you can use a set for this. Otherwise it will still work if you use map and set. But overall, that's all I have to show. Thanks.